I'm Michael Nelson. I'm the Director for Technology and International Affairs at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. And I'm very glad that the endowment is able to team up with the National Security Commission on Artificial Intelligence and with the Observer Research Foundation, a think tank in India, to provide this discussion on alliances for innovation, winning approaches to emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, machine learning, and big data. It's not always easy to assemble a panel like the one that we've assembled today. This group spans more than 12 time zones, but our partners have worked seamlessly with us to make this happen, and we're very grateful for their work, and I'm also very grateful for the communications team at Carnegie, which is using this infrastructure to enable this conversation. A key part of today's discussion is audience questions, and so I don't want you to turn off your cell phone. I want you to use it to send questions either on the YouTube chat, or you can use Twitter and send it to using hashtag #AskCarnegie. We will be monitoring that, and we hope to provide a good deal of time after the panel conversation to hear what you have to ask. We are looking at a lot of different topics today. We're reviewing the latest report from the National Security Commission on artificial intelligence. They cover a lot of ground. They're not just looking at AI software, they're looking at the data that trains it, they're looking at the training needed to get people who can use it effectively. They're looking at machine learning techniques, and most of all, they're looking at how this is going to be used and deployed around the world. The other thing we're doing that's a bit different is that unlike a lot of other discussions and a lot of articles and a lot of blog posts, we're not focusing on the US-China AI arms race. Instead, we're looking at competition and cooperation. And we're looking at the rest of the world, particularly India, to see how the United States, companies, government, and researchers can work together to facilitate the growth and deployment of AI. A lot of different topics today. So let me introduce our speakers. First off, let me introduce the panelists and our moderator, Andrew Wyckoff, who is with the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development in Paris, where he's the Director for Science, Technology, and Innovation, will be moderating. The OECD, as you may know, has developed AI principles, which have been endorsed not only by the OECD countries, but by the G20 nations as well. He will be leading a panel, which includes Nivruti Rai, tuning in from India. She is the head of Intel India and very involved in artificial intelligence there. She's also done a lot of work in international research collaborations. She's joined from India by Professor Vijay Raghavan. He is the principal scientific advisor to the government of India, works very closely with Prime Minister Modi. He previously served as the Secretary of the Department of Biotechnology for the government of India from January 2013 to January 2018. And then our third panelist is the Vice Chairman of the National Security Commission on Artificial Intelligence, Bob Work. He's also former Deputy Secretary of the Department of Defense. But our first speaker is the chairman of the National Security Commission on Artificial Intelligence, Eric Schmidt. And many of us have known him for a long time. He's had a lot of other roles, including at Sun Microsystems, Novell, Google, and Alphabet. But today he's representing the commission, and he'll provide an overview of what the commission is looking at and what the main issues they see and that need to be addressed. So let me turn it over to Eric and remind you again, ask Carnegie on Twitter for questions. Thank you. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Mike. You and I met more than 25 years ago, and our technology arc has followed a similar path. So when you called and said this was an interesting group and problem and opportunity, I jumped without hesitation. I'm appearing here as chairman of the National Security Commission on AI. Joining me is Bob Work, who you'll hear from shortly, who's the vice chairman. Between the two of us, we've led a commission of about 15 people who were appointed by Congress to take a look at the broader National Security Commission issues with respect to AI, which we'll sort of get into, which are incredible. But the overall message about that is AI is really important and partnerships are really important, which is what I'm going to sort of focus on today. AI is sort of central in our shared future. I cannot imagine America being successful in AI without both the kind of innovation model that we've had historically, as well as the partnerships that we're going to be putting in place, including those with India, and in particular, a stronger U.S.-India alliance. The AI is different from other things because it enables everything else. The way to understand it is that the progress in science, for example, will be fundamentally accelerated because AI allows you to manipulate the information and solve problems that were not solvable before. There are many problems in science for which we cannot do a full computation. The computers just are not fast enough and probably never will be, but AI can be used to approximate the answers. Similarly, if you take a look at like biology, which we really don't understand how it works very well still, we can use AI to monitor systems, predict outcomes. And the profound impact of this on health, for example, is yet to be seen. We're seeing it in little pockets, but wait till you go to the hospital and you can actually have an AI system that will help the doctor figure out how to treat you and really save lives. It goes on and on and on. So for many reasons, this is the time to get AI right. Not only is it important for our future, I use science, but the same is true for security, the same is true for business. The hottest position today in my industry is a PhD candidate doing AI research who'll get offers for jobs that are millions of dollars simply because of the speed with which these techniques can be used to improve customer happiness, revenue, global reach, and so forth in businesses. So it's a true craze. But it's happening in the US, it's happening elsewhere, but we have to put this in the context of an international landscape where the China competition becomes very, very important. So it's interesting that China, a very smart country, by the way, is working very hard to become an AI peer. And it's no surprise, at least not to me, that it has concerted plans to invest, research, and lead in AI. They've been doing it for a long time. Our report talks about this. The good news is we're still ahead, but they're coming up fast. They have a huge program of investment in people and funds and so forth, working in something called military civil fusion with their private corporations. As you know, Russia is also in developing AI for military uses, and along with China, using AI for disinformation campaigns. And if you don't really believe that, look at the announcements in the last week about the things that are going on in and around our election here in the United States. So what's happening is that we're in an AI-charged technology competition, fusing economic competition, competitiveness, if you will, great power rivalry, and we also have a contest between authoritarianism and democracy. And the reason I want to emphasize that contest is that there are aspects of AI which make authoritarianism more powerful or easy. Think about surveillance. And there are aspects of democracy where AI can be more powerful as well. For example, understanding the pattern in a democracy, which is not immediately apparent, but it turns out to be true. So if you do this analysis, as we in our commission have, you conclude that AI partnerships are important in all aspects of the competition. If you assume, as I do, that talent is distributed universally, right, uniformly, but opportunity is not, the fact of the matter is that China has 4 times as many very smart people, and by the way, India has even more, and therein lies our strategic opportunity. We won't get there on our own. America alone, the AI industry that the US I represent alone, is not going to make it. So when we do this AI partnerships have to have as part of them a commitment to some things that matter in the West. protecting individual rights, restoring commercial competition based on fair rules, and strengthening defense alliances, which Bob can talk about even more than I, that have kept the peace in Europe for more than 75 years in the Pacific. Now, partnerships are hard. We all understand this. Wouldn't it be easier if you were just in charge and you could tell everyone what to do? On the other hand, the lack of centralization also allows for the kind of innovation and the kind of creativity that our system is so good at. And so the fact that it's not too tightly managed means that we're going to have interesting surprise, interesting innovation, and so forth, which is the hallmark of American competition. So when I think about this, we have to figure out how to work through this AI future strategy collectively and not individually. And whether it's because you believe in what I'm saying, or whether you fear in the Indo-Pacific China's looming presence, this creates an opportunity to build these ties. If we don't, China will sort of screw it up, and all of a sudden we won't get into what I believe is our highest potential. Why does it matter? Economic growth, healthcare, science, our overall well-being, the future of our world depends on this. So these are not minor issues. So there is this sort of concern about China, which can be understood as China telegraphs what they are doing, and they appear to be on their path. The strategic threat of building the digital future, well, what happens is if you build it on Chinese infrastructure? You say, oh, no big deal. They're okay. They're smart people. Well, the values that their infrastructure are built on are not the same as Western values. They're different values. I'm not going to argue over which one is better, although I have a clear preference. But the important point is the values are different, and you're bringing values into a network that you may or may not like. And I think the reality is that people are afraid to choose sides. So the good news is that our potential partners abhor the use of AI to surcharge surveillance, oppress minority groups, impose ideological conformity. I think we benefited from the diversity of ideas and creativity that are hallmarks of democracy. So the other thing about a partnership that we put together is we have to figure out a way to get the data that we need across the world to build better systems. Again, consistent with employing the AI tools ethically and responsibly, we all benefit from collective thought and action throughout all the democracies. So in November, before the pandemic hit, with Dr. Kissinger, I went to India for a week. And I think I don't need to tell this audience that when you go to India, you understand the extraordinary potential of India. Maybe it's the level of intelligence of the people, or the way the schooling system works, or perhaps the food is fantastic. I don't really know. But the combination of the people and the energy and the drive makes India an incredible strategic partner for America from the standpoint of AI. Just look at the IITs and the quality of the people. I can go on about this, which I won't bore you, but I'm so used to working with Indians who were the top graduates out of the nation of India. They've moved to Silicon Valley. That's my norm. That's my normal lifestyle. And indeed, most of the companies I've worked in have a third to a half of the executives are Indian for that reason. So anyway, we've had this long India and U.S. have had this sort of long, strong science and technology relationship, and the countries are working on things like cyber and information and communications technologies and other areas. I remember 20 years ago thinking, when we built the original internet, we didn't put enough IP addresses in for India because we didn't think they were going to be that important. Not me personally, but the internet at the time. And we put an enormous number of fibers in initially to support the outshoring industry. And that has paid off in terms of building an Indian software industry that is now extremely impressive. And I think everybody here knows that the tech companies have thousands and thousands of employees in India doing really high quality work. So anyway, the important thing is that the AI Commission is proposing now a US-India strategic tech alliance to develop a regional tech policy. We think it should be done with India because of the scale of India, the ambitions of India, and the number of people and the diaspora that is India throughout Asia. And so basically, we had to get the talent programs in alignment. We need to get regulatory regimes align, and then we sort of have to deal with common societal problems, of which there's lots in India, right? There's lots in the US, there's even more in India. So what I like about this tech alliance idea, which is why we're proposing it, it's a strategic refocus of US policy around emerging technology with India as a focal point, right? Which is the only way I think of we're going to, if I could just be blunt on this, deal with the rising focal point that is China. So we've called on the US Secretary of State to work on this. We've called on the Secretary of State, and this is public, to have a department for precisely this. They were very receptive when we talked about them, so I hope that will happen. And there's so many other areas where the two countries can sort of combine their R&D, and I think we should just sort of figure what they are. But I don't want to take too long. We have an incredibly important panel here. I've just got to tell you that I believe this with my heart. America believes in partnerships and needs partners. I'm going to be very blunt. We can't get there without the partnership that I'm proposing and that we are proposing with India. The math doesn't work, and I'm a scientist. The fact of the matter is we've got to put something together along the lines of what we're describing. And to me, I'm assuming that there is a natural interest in India and America aligning on many, it's a natural partnership coming out of 50 years of changes in policy and changes in direction in both countries. So the opportunity of these partnerships, scientific, educational, commercial, and military, are obvious. Let me end with a quote from John F. Kennedy. "Diversity and independence, far from being opposed to the American conception of the world order, represent the very essence of our view of the future of the world." So we are embracing the diversity of the cultures. Indians know how diverse their own country is. America, God, is plenty diverse anyway. And we're trying to build partnerships that allow us to build extraordinarily high value products. We're not talking about trillions of dollars in new industry, consistent with Western values, the kind of individual freedom that we care so much about here in the United States. I want to thank everybody. Thank you, Mike, for inviting me, and I'm going to enjoy watching our panel. Thank you very much.
So thank you, Eric, for those opening words and setting out some of the major themes that appear in tab 5 of the report, which I think what we will discuss today. And I think you said it all when you said you can't get there on your own. This requires engaging with partners around the world, but particularly, as you said, the math leads quickly to India. I'd like to start the panel with Ms. Rai, and maybe you could tell us a little bit about your background, your thoughts about some of these emerging technologies, their opportunities and challenges, but most importantly, the theme of the session, which is how do we get foreign governments, both in India, Europe, and beyond, firms and researchers to work with their counterparts in the United States? Ms. Rai.
Thank you very much, Bob. My name is Nivriti, and the introduction I would like to give of me is I'm the first dual citizen of India. I have a United States citizenship, and I'm the first dual citizen for India. So whose heart is most interested in US and India? It's mine for sure. I have been very interested in driving AI agenda, not just for Intel, but also for India. Over the last 10 years, I have been working on AI, and it started with me and my team in India building an inference engine. And I'm happy to tell you that that inference engine is a critical product for Intel. So since then, when people were just talking AI, we were actually building an inference engine which did CNN and DNN algorithms. What I have been doing over the last I would say 2.5 years is I realized that AI is one technology that thrives on data, volume and variety, like Eric mentioned, and both US and India have plenty, and India has variety that you cannot even imagine. So we are requiring data. We need technology and IP. We need policy support, and then we need people. I really believe that on these 4 things, if we partner there can be tremendous value that both the countries are built on. The democratic nations that we are, the largest democracies we care about human beings and we care about the value for humanity. And I feel AI, we have just scratched the surface with search engines, recommendation engines, voice bots, and targeted marketing. We are all talking about elections, so I cannot miss that. But targeted marketing, however, that's just scratching the surface. Like Eric mentioned, India has tremendous problems. So does the world. I'll tell you that my country, India, sees 17 deaths on the road due to traffic accidents. Similarly, we lose 4 to 5 trillion due to non-communicable diseases because of which people die. So problems are plenty. So what we did is, as an industry member and a responsible industry member, I decided to work with the government as well as with academia. And just last week, we announced a research center called ENI. And that is meant to drive data collection in a manner that we can contextualize it, annotate it, make it available through an open source platform. We are focusing on 3 segments. We are focusing on health, smart mobility, as well as education. And, with the pandemic, we know that these 3 areas are critical for the world. And lastly, we want to make sure that we provide unique algorithms on these 3 areas. The intent is, India, what I can tell you, has done beautifully well over the 5-6 years is we have built national level platforms. And we have encouraged businesses, academia to drive research, making them, the base platform, whether it is Aadhaar, which is the unique identifier. And similarly, we have, goods and services tax, etc. So my goal is to build an AI standard platform such that, data is available with, of course, privacy, security, safety. And we have a platform, we call it Federated Learning Platform, and I can tell later about it. The intent is to drive research, global research. Somebody sitting in the United States can access this data and drive health research. Somebody sitting in Israel can modify the algorithm and make it better. That's the intent. And, we started working 3 years ago, but we announced this research center just last week. So I'm happy to share that with you. But AI is my agenda for India and for the world.
Congratulations on that, and thank you for those opening remarks. We'll come back to them, particularly the international cooperation that you mentioned. But now let me turn to Dr. Vijay Raghavan. Dr. Raghavan, if you could, again, introduce yourself a little bit. Tell us about your views of the technologies, the opportunities and challenges, but really go to the heart of today's discussion, which is about international cooperation and collaboration.
Thank you very much, Andrew. I'm Vijay Raghavan. I'm the Principal Scientific Advisor to the Government of India. And that job cuts across all ministries of the Government of India, including the Science and Technology Ministries, to try and distill core synergistic directions for us to work together to serve India's social and economic growth. Now, India's challenges are several. We have here extraordinary capabilities in science and technology, but we are, on one hand, a France and a Germany in terms of being an economic powerhouse, and at the same time have the most demanding of contexts as you can find anywhere in the world. And this salt and pepper mix is India's biggest challenge. And the biggest challenge there is, you can put water on this mixture, but the pepper needs to also dissolve and get connected with the rest of India. How does one do that? Is the question. In other words, in terms of AI or anything else we do, our goal is how do we reach the major questions which need to be answered in health, agriculture, and education. If we get there, then economic growth and economic collaboration will amplify enormously. And there are many routes we have taken to get there, which have been increasingly successful. Now, India's success has come principally because of its investment in its young demography. Most Indians, 2/3 of us are, less than 30 years of age, and there's an enormous energy in our ecosystem to use education and learning to increase opportunities, and that's the major focus. Now let's come to AI, and what are the issues at stake? There are three kinds of perceptions about AI. Each of them have their own reality. One is the utopian one about how AI and its use through machine learning and deep learning will address complex problems in a way which solutions currently evade us, and therefore will be a great tool to address these problems. The dystopian view is that this has been usurped by industry in a manner where privacy will be taken up, and therefore, your decision making is no longer in your hands. The third view, which comes about, is how AI will be usurped by authoritarian regimes to snoop and control every action one makes inside the country, and also to snoop and take decisions outside the country. So these are the broad kinds of views, each extreme in its own way, which are there about AI. And the challenge for democracies is to have industry involvement in AI in a big way without compromising privacy and access for social good, and have governments use AI for better governance. So this is our principal challenge. Now let's see how we can go ahead with these challenges in terms of US-India collaboration. And then we must step back a little bit from AI. Early US-India collaborations had two components. A collaboration which was enormous by Indians going to America and working in multiple places, as we've heard. And that was absolutely a people-to-people collaboration. Now, the government-to-government collaborations in R&D and science have grown steadily. They started off in a way which was rocky. The Indian Institute of Technology is one at Kanpur, is an extraordinary example of a consortium of American universities coming together and using what was known as the PL 480 funds to stimulate scholarship, learning, and discovery. That has been copied all over the country. There are many IITs, many Indian Institutes of Science, Education and Research, many medical colleges, and the investment in human resource development, in other words, is going out of scale. The new education policy will expand this, the national education policy, into an area where 90% of our students go to state-run universities and colleges where there's little research. And all what you're seeing today is from 10% of the students in India. Imagine what will happen when you have 90% coming into research, and that's going to happen in the next next year beginning from now. And AI and computer science and mathematics are areas where you're going to see young people really going extremely well. Now, no matter how much we talk about US-India collaboration, we cannot ignore the C word in the room. And China is a very important issue. And we can't have collaboration without paying attention to that. And that again comes into the three kinds of pillars I spoke about what AI is used for. But in today's world, in terms of supply chains, manufacturing, health systems, engineering, I completely agree that this is a terrific opportunity today for India not only to be a partner with the US, but to be in many ways a leading partner driving a new approach to AI globally, anchored with a fulcrum in Asia, and in a manner which addresses the complexities of our planet with our extraordinary talent which we have, the extraordinary engine of innovation which is there in the US, and the extraordinary partnership which Indians in America and Americans in India have had. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Vijay Raghavan. That's, I think, a perfect segue into Mr. Wark, who is the vice chair of the commission. Mr. Wark, if you could, again, tell us a little bit about your background, your interest in AI, hopes and fears possibly, but most importantly about the international collaboration that you see and is a key element of the report.
Thank you, Andrew. It's great to be here today, and hello to everyone who's listening. I was born into a Marine family. My father was a U.S. Marine. I joined the Marine Corps and spent 27 years on active duty, retiring in 2001. I spent the next 8 years working in think tank world, really focused on the U.S. Navy and U.S. Marine Corps and commenting on their future plans, etc. And in 2009, I was asked to be the Undersecretary of the Navy, which is the #2 civilian inside the Department of the Navy. And I spent that time for 4 years. Now, during that time, you don't have any time to think in these type of jobs. You're tied down totally by your inbox. And I was monitoring very carefully the technological trends in the Western Pacific, especially vis-a-vis our military technical competition with China. And the trends were very concerning to me, as they were concerning to all of the senior leaders in the Department of the Navy. When I left in 2013, I took over as the Chief Executive Officer of the Center for a New American Security. And I finally had some time to think. So I spent the entire year thinking, how would we be able to establish conventional deterrence in the Western Pacific? What would be the means by which the United States might be able to lessen the likelihood of an inadvertent war with China? And I quickly concluded that AI, artificial intelligence, and robotics was the key to the future. And it was a good way that we might be able to establish an overmatch which would lessen the likelihood of a confrontation with the People's Republic of China. Ash Carter, who was the Deputy Secretary of Defense at the time, left unexpectedly, and so I was asked to come back in as the Deputy Secretary. So as soon as I had the opportunity, I started trying to get the department to think about, how would an AI future change things? And how would we be able to exploit AI-enabled applications across the entire department, from the back office, where we're doing robotic process automation, to the very front lines. And that led to a thing that we call the third offset strategy, which we tried to say, look, this is the way we need to pursue our future. Now, having lived and been a part or near the Department of Defense for my entire life, literally, the key advantage the United States has had since the end of World War II, indeed starting in World War II, are coalitions and partners and alliances. That is the center of gravity of U.S. defense strategy and thinking. So it was natural when the commission started to talk about collaborations, it was natural for me to say this has got to be a central part of our strategy going forward. We've had 3 reports out of the commission. The first report was really focused on the United States, trying to organize ourselves best for an AI competition. The second report, really the big idea there was to improve our talent pool. We all feel very strongly on the commission that the key to the AI competition is talent. And so we really focused on how do we increase the digital fluency of the entire federal government and the Department of Defense in particular. This third report really focused on coalitions and partnerships and alliances. We wanted to deepen global AI coordination on defense and security to emphasize democratic values. As we've already talked about, one dystopian view is authoritarian regimes. The values of authoritarian regimes will be reflected in the technologies they pursue, and that is absolutely true when it comes to artificial intelligence. So we wanted to deepen global AI coordination for defense and security among democratic nations. Second, we wanted to shape AI cooperation through multilateral forums, starting to really marshal the great idea, the innovation, and the urgency that you can see around the world in this very exciting technology. And then we wanted to build resilient bilateral AI cooperation with key allies and partners. And as Eric said, it immediately became evident to us that one of the most important things we could do is to establish a U.S.-India Strategic Technical Alliance, which we refer to as UISTA. You got to have an acronym if you deal with the Department of Defense in any way, shape, or form. So I apologize. But India is such a logical partner for us. We're the two largest democracies in the world. We share common values. We see problems the same way in health and transportation and in finances and in agriculture. There are many problems that we share. But India is a leader in international multilateral fora already, where AI technical standards are being created and agreed upon. It's a founding member of the Global Partnership on Artificial Intelligence, GPAI. Indian civil society is active in the World Intellectual Property Organization's conversation on AI and intellectual property. Over 30 Indian entities that we counted, and there may be more, are represented within the International Telecommunication Union and are engaged in the AI for Global Good Summit. And finally, India is an important part of the International Standards Organizations, ISO, and the UN discussion on lethal autonomous weapons and the newly emerging D10. So you couldn't ask for a more logical partner to try to convince. We should share our innovation, share our ideas, and cooperate on the development of AI for good and AI for democratic values, AI for the betterment of all of our citizens. And so we're very excited. This was one of the big ideas in our third quarter report. And we're hoping that the recommendations to the Department of State, that we may be able to see this partnership develop and grow from a partnership to a true tech alliance. Thanks.
Thank you, Bob. And I think that sets us up very nicely for the next round of questions, but I want to make sure we get to the audience as well. So I just remind my panelists, we have about 7 to 10 minutes. So I would ask you, just kind of picking up on where Bob left us with the role of both of international collaboration. Now, this can be facilitated through international organizations such as the one I work for, and we are the Secretariat host for the Global Partnership on AI, which hasn't yet lifted off, but I think has great promise here. But also, I'm fully aware, having worked in an IO for a number of years, it's not always easy, as Mr. Schmidt was saying. There are barriers and hurdles to doing so. So if you could just maybe quickly off the top of your head, talk about some of those hurdles, how we surmount them, but also how we use international organizations to get at some of the thorny issues of AI, big data, sharing of data, which still isn't seamless across borders. Again, Nivriti, if you could start us off, just quickly, and apologies, I mispronounced your first name.
No problem. My name is Nivriti. So I was pretty close. So I really believe international organizations can partner, especially for data alliances, for security alliances, for standards building, for ethics, and many such areas which are going to be really critical for AI, because as we all know, leverages algorithm, AI leverages data, and they are not immune to bias. They are not immune to bugs. They are not immune to malware, and they are not immune to manipulation. And therefore, it is absolutely essential to partner on driving policies that, enable all these algorithms to be somewhat immune to these attacks that will happen. The other thing that bothers me is the weaponization of AI and how AI can be leveraged, against in a autonomous way against people or objects or whatever have you. Because when we look at weaponization, then you don't see boundaries or countries or anything. It travels. All of this attack will travel in space where, you don't see country boundaries. So I really think we have to partner at multiple nation levels for the safety, security of humanity. And in addition to the social good. And I really believe that with India, just to share one quick statistic, Gartner did an analysis that really excited me. If you look at the entire AI resources of the world, United States has most, 16%. China has 9%. India has 8%. The minute India and US partner, from 16%, we become 24%. Also, in the last 20 years, the amount of patents China has filed versus US has filed versus India, we significantly increase. Also, investment. Even though, China's investment is 60% over the last 5 years of the world investment, US is about, 25%, India is 5%. So what, it's 5%. Together we become 30%. And the number of companies US has, significantly larger, 2,000-ish companies. India has another 300. We significantly increase. But the biggest value I see is in partnership with people. I really think today we have 8%, but I want to tell you the last week when I drove the AI summit in India, I trained 80,000 people on AI. Where can you get this kind of scale with, like, Bob said and Eric said, we have similar agenda. Population scale data for national level, for humanity level good. And I really think AI is one area which bothers me and makes me happy, because there are certain things we must do and there are certain things we must not do. But there are a whole lot of things which can be done with restriction. And this is the restriction which can be managed through the framework of policy. Just like human beings have a framework of police, legal, all of those things, artificial intelligence also requires that framework. And I think that's where we as multiple countries need to come together. And I really think Indo-Pacific, India, US is a very natural partnership that we must sign up today and start working on the execution of how do we partner on data, technology, people, and policy.
Great. Thank you very, very much. Dr. Vijay Raghavan, what are some of your thoughts about this question?
Well, there are 3 levels by which data sharing for AI will emerge in terms of policies, rules, and guidelines. One will be from organizations such as the OECD. The second will be from individual governments, the US government or the Indian government, and so on. And the third will be collaborations, government to government, government to industry, industry to industry, on specific topics. All of these will need to feed back into each other, and policies will rapidly evolve. They'll have 2 components. One, general important guiding principles, which you heard about. Second, there will be tensions which come across because of using these principles, interpreting them for specific trade benefit. This is normal in any kind of collaboration or any kind of competition. That needs to be dealt with. But I think there are extraordinary possibilities here in the agricultural sector, for example, in the health sector, with education cutting across, for AI to really have an enormous impact through our collaborations. Thank you.
Thank you. Bob Work, if I could end with you, and then we'll open up to some of the questions streaming in from the audience. But I'd welcome your it's heartening for me to hear that you thought this was an important part, one of your recommendations. I guess my question is, what do you think some of the barriers are that we need to address, and how can we use international organizations to maybe address some of these barriers?
Yeah, there's a saying in the U.S. military that the only thing worse than working with an alliance is working without one. As Eric said, alliances are hard. You have to take into account the interests and the desires of your partners. And so one of the big things is just getting into the mindset that, and we debated this. We said, hey, is this about American values? No, it's about democratic values. It's about the importance of the individual. It's about the importance of privacy. We want this cooperation with our AI allies to really focus on the betterment of our futures for our citizens. For me, this is my own opinion. The thing that will have the greatest impact on the human condition in the 21st century is synthetic biology. And the greatest thing that will have, or the thing that will have the greatest impact on the conduct of warfare is artificial intelligence. And if you think of them as two sides of a same coin, one side you have the digitization of life, and the other side you have machines that mimic human intelligence. And both of them share the same moral, ethical, and legal issues that democratic nations have to debate so that we can define the boundaries of what we will tolerate in these very powerful technologies. I think the first place that could really start, you have to have confidence building measures, and you have to prove that everyone in the alliance is equal and every voice is equal. And I think we should exploit this terrible pandemic to say the first place we cooperate is on AI in health for the betterment of all of our citizens, to improve their lives and to extend their lives so that they can just they're more fulfilled and they have a much more vibrant life. And then on the military side, we need to really figure out these ethical, moral, and legal dimensions on what democracies would tolerate on the battlefield. We all want to remove bias from our algorithms. That's one area where I think we could agree to work on right away. We all want to have trustworthy AI. So in the United States, we worry, how do we test, evaluate, validate, and verify algorithms so that we know the algorithms will perform as we expect them to do when we release them into the wild. We all want to have explainable AI, so we understand how the AI came to its recommended course of action. All of these things we could start to work on. The other thing that every democracy has incentive to do is democracies are just ideal targets for what I will call societal and governance cohesion attacks by authoritarian regimes, where they try to find fissures in our democracy, and they widen the fissure and they deepen the fissure. And they're trying to cause our democracies to really fail when it's very important. And every single democracy faces this. I know our European allies face it. I assume India faces the same problem. And of course, we face it. Working out how we can stop that problem would be very, very important. So you take the tactical things, like how do we get trustworthy AI and how do we get explainable AI? And then you move beyond health to the health of the globe. How can AI help us solve global warming, for example? Will it be able to identify pathways that we hadn't thought about before, which would impact every citizen on our planet? So the reason I'm so passionate about this, I'm sorry, I talked too long, is that as Eric said, ecosystem, the AI ecosystem in India, it just seems to me to be a natural partner with the U.S. AI ecosystem for the benefit of the globe. Sorry, I'll get off my soapbox.
No, it's good to hear you. And what you've really done is you've answered one of the questions coming from the audience, which is, if India is the focal point of U.S. future AI strategy, especially in partnerships, which areas do you expect would be the low-hanging fruit where collaboration could start in terms of both national security and social good? And you've listed a couple of these, Bob. I'd like to hear from the other two panelists if they have anything to amplify or to add to what you've said. So if we could start with Nivriti.
Sure. What I think we should start with is, a look at how can we share data. So if you think of India, Europe, United States, any country, the biggest challenge that I feel is the privacy and sharing of data or moving the data, from one country to the other. That's one big problem. But there are technologies that, I know I'm working on. We call it federated learning platform, as well as, privacy secure machine learning. So look at multiple technologies where we can start working on actually leveraging data. India is a very data rich country, no denying, just because of the sheer size of the population. But like I said, the data has to be structured, the data has to be standard, that, different usages can be enabled. And like Bob said, health is so important at this point of time. Beating this COVID-19 is the number one priority in so many people's mind when health is concerned. So I really feel looking at how can we share data, whether through, federated learning platforms like we are trying, or through, privacy safe machine learning, I think that is number one. Number two is look at, policies. I told you that algorithms are not safe because there are biases, there are bugs, there are so many ways, they can be compromised. So look at sharing our intellect, sharing the resources, people. And like I said, 16% US, 8% India makes it 24. So makes a quarter of AI resources between these two countries. So those are, I think, very, very critical. And looking at how do we prevent AI to be used as a weapon or a weaponization. I think the third thing is list down those, policies that enable, this is where AI can be used, this is where AI cannot be used, just like we do with human beings. Stealing is an offense, you go in the jail. But borrowing money, making sure, that you give all the details is fine. So we have to identify what are the okay use cases of AI with certain restrictions. I think policy is another critical part, and bias and bugs, those kind of things need to be looked at, because that will be very important for us to make sure that AI is used for the good.
Thank you very much. So let me just end before I turn to the Q&A turn over the moderation role and ask Vijay to respond to this last question about where are the good on-ramps to cooperation between India and the United States?
Well, let's take health. There are three important ways in which health can be transformative through AI for India and for the world. The first is already happening. If you look at Indian hospitals and doctors, they're working with radiology information, for example, X-ray scans, MRI, and so on and so forth, with a whole lot of countries all over the world using AI tools to feed back and give expert opinion. These expert opinions are going to rural areas, small towns in Indonesia and the Philippines, for example. In other words, cutting edge medical advice is going to the best, to the most needy people in the world. Now, the second component, with India's new telemedicine guidelines and e-pharmacy guidelines, and that expanding enormously through a national insurance scheme, telemedicine and this national insurance scheme will ensure this reaches all over India. And therefore, you will have a situation where Indian expert medical practitioners will have the data, analyze it, and serve India, serve the world, and indeed open up a new era. That's the third pillar, a new era of call center interactions in a manner where, very high-end R&D export is going to be taking place in health, also in agriculture, in other kinds of areas. This is going to be absolutely transformative in a manner which is very, very different from a relatively low-end call center work. You're going to have the best and the brightest working remotely, tackling the best and the most important problems.
That sounds incredibly promising. Thank you. And so let me just wrap this up by taking a few liberties as your moderator, and just say that this global partnership on AI, which the report refers to and to which India is a founding member, is built around the AI principles that the OECD put forward and the G20 adopted in 2019. So it goes to many of the principles that Mr. Work was talking about, trustworthiness and accountability and explainability. But then it tries to operationalize these into concrete actions through these working groups. And just as was said, one is on data and data governance. And a second, which was just added, is on kind of the health response to COVID. So I think this adheres to some of the things you've been saying and provides maybe a first step, or one of many steps. With that, let me turn it back over to Carnegie and Dhruva J. Shankar, who I think will provide some concluding remarks.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you to the panelists. We're at the end of this program, and on behalf of the Observer Research Foundation, which is a partner in this and is a think tank based in India, I'm the director of the US initiative based in Washington. It just leaves it to me to thank all the participants for taking time out of their busy schedules for what has been a really rich and informative, but very also concise and pointed discussion. And it was one which I certainly benefited from greatly. I'd also like to thank our partners, the National Security Commission on Artificial Intelligence and the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace for co-organizing this with us. And finally, just a few thoughts to end with from this discussion. I think it was excellent in showcasing the potential of artificial intelligence beyond the buzzwords, if you will, beyond the short-term time horizons as to how it could be potentially transformative in a number of different ways. Secondly, I thought it was very beneficial in highlighting the democratic and the ethical dilemmas that democratic societies will have to confront as they harness the power of artificial intelligence. So it was not just, as Dr. Vijay Raghavan said, not just a utopian view of AI, but I think a much more realistically grounded discussion that brought in the ethical component as well. But finally, I think ultimately it was an optimistic discussion, if you will, on not just on the technological potential, but also on the potential for partnership for international collaboration involving not just the United States and India as democratic countries, but also much of the rest of the world as well. So with that note, and these are just some of my broad takeaways from the discussion. Congratulations to the NSCAI for issuing its interim report, and we were really grateful to have Eric Schmidt, the chairman, and the vice chairman, Bob Work, participate in this discussion. But hopefully this should provide a platform not just for how the US government thinks about artificial intelligence policy in the future, but also how the US and India and other partners collaborate in this important domain in the years ahead. So with that, thank you all very much for this discussion, to participants, and thanks to all of the viewers as well. Good morning and goodbye from Washington.